Well, welcome to the third episode of the ArcFlash podcast, sparking ideas in the data center sector. I'm Kevin Aboden.
And I'm Jabez Tan. We are here to provide a balanced, nuanced, and hopefully unbiased view on the state and most pressing topics affecting the data center and hyperscale cloud industry. We want to see our industry succeed, but we're also not naive cheerleaders nor doomsayers. What we ultimately believe is the best way forward to see the industry experience sustainable growth is by addressing and being transparent with the challenges and sharing the key themes and trends that are unfolding in the sector. And I've been covering this space as an industry analyst since 2011 and currently lead a data center research practice at Structure Research. And with that, Kevin, we've got some really interesting topics to talk about today. Number one on most people's minds is what's happening with Nvidia as they reported their recent quarterly earnings results. Pretty impressive.
Oh, yeah, when you're talking about anything 100% growth year over year, I don't think we've ever seen anything like that in the space. Even in the most halcyon days of cloud growth, you were looking at quarter on quarter growth of 40%, which is amazing. Don't get me wrong, of course. And they're all the large cloud services are still seeing very strong growth by the standards of any other industry. But I think the situation with Nvidia blew away all analysts' expectations, right? I think internally we were trying to figure out where it might be. I'm sure you were too, and this was far surpassing anything that even the most bullish analysts could have expected.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to recap the numbers really quickly, we won't spend too much time on it since people can just look it up, but really reporting $13.5 billion in revenue for the quarter. And that's up, like you said, 88% quarter over quarter. That's not year over year, that's quarter over quarter. So within a 3 months time horizon, their revenues increased 88% to 13.5 billion. So that's just put that into perspective here. And that's up 101% year over year with the data center segment driving, obviously, no surprise, a bulk of that growth with data center compute revenue nearly tripling year over year.
And it's a wonderful position for the company to be in. I mean, we've covered AI in our first two episodes in quite a lot of detail on how AI is going to develop is almost entirely at this point through NVIDIA DGX and a lot of the chipsets that they're making. I think the question has to be then, can this continue, right? And I think there's any amount of speculation on that. I'd almost say that it's probably up to the data center industry to help this continue, right? Like if we can't provide the amount of capacity needed or the rack density needed in order to for these sales to continue, we don't want to have that situation where a lot of the equipment has already been acquired, but we can't supply the real estate.
Yeah, exactly. And the growth is not surprising when you think about the the dynamic that's playing out. There's a popular theory called aggregation theory that's been made popular in the tech sector, and that's what happened with social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter being aggregators of content, and then you have the hyperscalers, AWS, Azure, GCP, being aggregators of enterprise IT infrastructure, or enterprise IT workloads. And then now at the apex of that, you have NVIDIA being the aggregator of basically data center chips and server hardware. And so it is surprising, but it's also not surprising given that, if you're looking for high quality GPU chips, like who are you going to get it from? NVIDIA. And you have all the biggest hyperscalers and Chinese hyperscalers for that matter as well, all knocking on NVIDIA's door and saying, hey, can I get those GPU chips from you?
Absolutely. And I think that's going to be another question going forward. I know no one wants to touch politics too much. It's a dangerous arena to step into. But when you mentioned China, I think that's going to be the question: is how much Nvidia will be allowed to continue to sell into China for all the AI development going on there, all the hyperscalers that require the sets.
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the exposure to China because management did lay out some information regarding that dynamic with its sales to China. So, just the level set, China demand for Nvidia typically ranges between 20 to 25% of their data center revenue segment. So not crazy big, but not insignificant as well. And that includes both the compute, which is the chips, and the networking solutions as well. And I think what's happening there is that management continues to expect its GPU business in China to increase quarter over quarter. Uh, And I think, that's, and it does not anticipate any additional export restrictions on its data center GPUs. And for users that don't know, Nvidia had to basically dumb down its GPU chips because of US regulations. So it's basically selling to these Chinese hyperscalers a throttled down version of its H100 and A100 chips.
Which, even though they're throttled down, they're still quite impressive, right? It's still better than what anyone else can provide at the same time.
Yeah, that's kind of, just putting into perspective how far ahead Nvidia is from the competition, that Chinese hyperscalers are even willing to buy these throttle down chips, because, they're not making that level of chips in-house, at least for now. I know they're investing heavily to enable that capacity in-house within China, but that's not going to happen for at least another few years.
Sure, sure. It's going to be an interesting arms race, and I think too,
Yeah. And
reading between the lines a little bit, you do see that in Nvidia is talking about AI as a service a little bit now. So does that mean more of a software driven growth as opposed to just hardware driven growth going forward? I think that's going to be an interesting battle point for the company.
Yeah, and that's a really good point that you brought up, because most people think of Nvidia as a chip maker, like, oh, they're just a hardware vendor. But actually, their secret sauce into why they're so successful is they built a full library, a full software stack behind these NVIDIA chips. And not only that, they've also acquired, or now have in-house their own networking platform that allows you to have optimal connectivity and communication between each of these chips. So when you're deploying these clusters of GPU chips, you're not just deploying one chip and saying, okay, I'm just going to plug in my Ethernet cable to this one GPU chip. You're connecting hundreds, if not thousands, of chips together. And how are these chips going to talk to each other and exchange data information and support these generative AI workloads and large language models? Yeah, they're using NVIDIA's InfiniBand networking platform, which they acquired from Mellanox. I'm not sure if you remember that company, but that is
Mm-hmm.
basically the networking solution tool that's powering the communication between these GPU chips. So it's not just the hardware; it's the software stack behind it, the API libraries that are very developer friendly, as well as the networking platform that's bundled into this entire end-to-end solution. That's what's making NVIDIA's value proposition so sticky. And to your point, NVIDIA could easily be the next hyperscaler in terms of powering this AI as a service segment that's never existed before. Yeah, so super exciting, Kevin.
I agree. We have a lot of growth to join hands with as an industry with that company.
Yeah, and also wanted to point out some interesting things with customers. They said their major customers continue to include the usual hyperscalers. So they called out AWS, Google Cloud, Meta, Azure, Oracle Cloud, and also a quote unquote growing number of GPU cloud providers that are deploying in volume HGX systems based on its Hopper and Ampere architecture Tensor Core GPU. So they definitely singled out CoreWeave, given that NVIDIA does have a equity stake in that company as well. And CoreWeave has been front of mind for a lot of people in the data center industry. Not sure if that's been crossing your radar as well, Kevin.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the fact that NVIDIA is backing not just CoreWeave, but many startups, right, in the space, those are going to be the winners of this of the industry, right? Because they have first access to NVIDIA technology. They're going to be partnering on everything from the beginning, and they're well funded. So all those things together mean that they have a jump up on a lot of the other startups that haven't built the relationship yet.
Yeah, and they also disclose another data point, which is that the large CSP customers are contributing just over 50% of their revenue in Q2. So I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure that also includes that subset of Chinese CSPs that they referenced earlier. But it could be in addition. They didn't really provide much clarity on that, but that's also interesting to point out as well. And also they made some interesting notable partnerships in the quarter. So they partnered with Snowflake, which is a SaaS company, to provide enterprises with paths to create customized AI apps. They also announced a new enterprise offering with VMware called VMware Private AI Foundation. So that's an integrated platform featuring AI software powered by the compute from Nvidia, so that Nvidia's enterprise customers now have access to AI grade infrastructure via the Nvidia relationship. So yeah, Nvidia just seems to be moving towards this channel relationship, just enabling the large CSPs, enabling the system integrators, and enabling these SaaS companies to further accelerate their customers' growth.
Absolutely. So we went really in depth there. Let's a couple other things that we've been working on lately. We've been thinking on, I guess you could say, the growth across Southeast Asia, and not to plug our own work for too long, but probably most of you watching saw our press release, EdgeConnect's press release around Malaysia this week, and I think that's the end result of all of these long trends going across the industry that are causing regional growth to happen. And so Malaysia's the tip of the iceberg, right? Like we've seen immense growth, by the several 100% across Indonesia. Thailand's gotten a lot of interest lately. Vietnam's just getting started. Everything sort of began with that fallout from Singapore and the moratorium. And then there was this realization that, oh, actually, these markets have hundreds of millions of people that are well underserved. And these are massive growth markets.
Yeah, and I thought what was most notable, Kevin, about your or EdgeConnect's entry into Malaysia is that you guys did a three-pronged strategy. You had a downtown CBD site, I think that's about 19 megs of IT. You have a proximate site that's around 70, and then another much larger site in Cyberjaya that's like 200 plus megs of IT load. So, when I see that, I'm like, these guys get cloud architecture. Like you have the downtown location for the connectivity on ramps, the edge deployments, and possibly new AI on ramps. You have the proximate compute that can house more sensitive workloads that are need to be more proximate to end users, and then you have that large compute server farm where you can deploy these large cloud AZs. And so I think when you approach a hyperscaler, not many people realize when you approach a hyperscaler with that type of value prop, that really resonates with them because they can check all of the different boxes with all their different teams in terms of the IT infrastructure workloads that they require.
You're amazingly kind. You read the press release very well. It's right. That's
It's
awesome.
my job, Kevin.
One of a handful, but I think so. Extrapolating that right across the industry, though, I think we could argue that across Southeast Asia, you mentioned the network part in downtown KL, a lot of network is being ignored across the region. Right? There's this assumption that there's a lack of sophistication when really these are the exact same clients that are buying the largest amounts of space all over the world, have very similar requirements, and have are going to be expecting a huge uptick in needs for bandwidth in just the amount of I guess density among other things over the long haul. And so if every operator isn't providing a diversified strategy in the region, then Southeast Asia isn't going to grow as quickly as it could. So we're talking about an area that so far has not run into the power issues that are affecting a lot of the other places that we're developing as an industry. And so in the meantime, we have to diversify because at some point there will be those power issues because we run into them everywhere else. And we have to be set by that point that we have a good ecosystem.
Yeah, and talk about a head fake, Kevin, because when, 4 years ago, back in 2018, when people were saying, okay, there needs to be more capacity throughout Southeast Asia, not just centralized in Singapore, people naturally thought, hey, Indonesia, Jakarta is going to be this next crazy boom market. And it sort of was for a short period. Like people were starting to make investments in there. They were anticipating this boom of large wave of demand. But then no one expected if you would have told me back in 2018 that Malaysia's pipeline would far exceed Jakarta's, I would have said, Kevin, you're crazy. But it is happening, and not just in KL Cyberjaya, but also in Johor. I think the KL pipeline far exceeds Jakarta's right now, if I'm not mistaken. But if you add in Johor, it's just Malaysia's just been the market outside of Singapore.
Well, and it helps that when local government throws open the door and says, we want you here. And I think that's been largely the case throughout Malaysia to date because it's recognized that this is a huge growth sector. it makes sense to the economy that was started in the 90s in Cyberjaya, right? Like Cyberjaya was designed to be a tech hub. Except to date, the number of data centers in Cyberjaya is about that of a tertiary market globally. And so, although it has a lot of manufacturing, the data center part was somewhat absent, and that's going to be changing quite a ways because, let alone what everyone's doing in Cyberjaya, the connectivity down the country to Johor and onward to Singapore and all the cable landing stations. I mean, that's going to be very powerful. And once that ecosystem gets constructed, that's going to be sticky because it's already been built and there's no reason to go elsewhere.
Yeah, when you've poured in hundreds of millions of dollars in a location, you don't just pack up and leave, right, Kevin?
No,
You further invest and you build a moat and ecosystem around it, as we've seen play out in many other markets.
absolutely. And I think the cool thing, if you're from the operator perspective, if you're looking across the region, your client base is actually larger than a lot of other regions of the world. And the reason I say that is because in certain other areas of the world, maybe it's a political issue to have a US hyperscaler or a Chinese hyperscaler, depending on the location. But in Southeast Asia, these companies compete on similar footing. There isn't as much political strife locally, and so all the platforms have equal opportunity for expansion, and they all want to, and they're continuing to both on both sides of the equation win clients. And so it becomes a very valuable thing when your client base opens up to and you can lease dozens of megawatts to a greater array of people.
Yeah, 100% agree. And when you look at which markets the Chinese hyperscalers are welcomed in, it's not many markets across the world, right? And so Southeast Asia is absolutely a market that the Chinese hyperscalers are investing heavily in because they can't really be in Australia, they can't really be in India, US, no. Europe depends on which market in Europe, but for the most part, not very welcomed in the European markets. And so, where are they going to go? They're going to invest in markets that have large populations of Chinese speaking people that are using their apps, and then eventually deploy enterprise cloud infrastructure.
Agreed.
And
Agreed.
Kevin,
Looking forward to massive growth.
yeah, and Kevin, you've been traveling quite a bit. Let us know what you've learned in your travels, anything interesting that has come up over the last couple weeks.
We're busy. As an industry, we're extremely busy, and it's funny because I can't find anyone right now who's not overworked. But I think everyone on listening to this podcast is in the same boat. And speaking of boats, I was actually on a panel of late, and it sort of refocused my mind on cables, cable landings, and so forth. And I think an interesting statistic that was brought to mind is that we just don't have enough cable ships. And this is something that if you're more on the terrestrial infrastructure side and you're building data centers, a lot of times if you're not involved in landing stations, you forget that part of it that, yeah, there's are very specific ships needed to deploy very specific technology. In other words, the cables all over the world. And at this point, with dozens of cables under construction, especially really large ones like to Africa that's about to go live, or some of these cables that are going from Europe through the Middle East to Asia and so forth, that's a lot of bandwidth to take up. And so I understand there are many ships that are currently under construction, but I think this was just a little bit of a jarring reminder that even though we want to build the compute requirements on land, actually transferring data is going to continue to be a sticking point, and more bandwidth is going to be needed as more data gets created.
Yeah, and people, just to take a step back, people don't really understand that the cloud is not really in the sky, it's actually in the ocean. That's where the cloud is. It's traversing these undersea cables. That's how you get data, transferred across countries, across continents, is these submarine cables.
Absolutely, and I think if we don't partner more closely with the submarine cable industry, and some of the big data center clients are funding a lot of the submarine cables. There have been a few cases late where it's better tie-ins with larger amounts of compute closer to the cable landing or at the cable landing site. But this is going to be a greater consideration, and the cost of these cables is immense. So I don't know if, as operators, we want to assume that's going to be part of our operating model going forward. Especially when we also have to look into power generation as well as cabling. But these costs are something to consider going forward if we want to give clients the best service that they can get.
Mm, makes sense. And that's why the hyperscalers are part of these consortiums now that are deploying these cables
Yep.
because they see how critical it is to their infrastructure and they have the capital to throw tons of money at these cables as well.
So we've been well connected and we've covered a bunch of subjects this week. Tune in next week. We're going to have more exciting guests, and we'll see you then. Take care.
See ya.